So yeah, how you been, man? Another week, man.
Another week. That's putting it rather mildly. I mean, it's second full week of my new job. The country that we're living in is having a grand old time, and yeah. Congratulations, by the way, on the new edition.
Oh yeah, thank you. He's been working out pretty nicely. I mean, the first day was a little rough, and it's still we all four of us aren't really into a steady routine. But like a prime example this morning. You know, my my wife Jamie, she had to leave early for work, earlier than normal, in the point that she was gonna go to work before I woke up. So I asked her one thing.
And what was that?
I asked her if she could wake me up before you go.
I saw that one coming from a mile away, and yet I still got hit by it. Ouch.
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on all sides of the Mississippi. Actually, all sides of planet Earth. And the way that we measure that is that we go from Ukraine to Uganda, but we take the long way around. This podcast is called Hey Listen to This, and it is hosted by two dashingly good looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one. I am the only. I'm the one who tries to close his store on time, but yet there's an internal server error delaying his departure time by 30 minutes. Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, I managed to get to work in a decent amount of time despite being 20 minutes late, Matthew James Durzik. And for those of you wondering what this show is, it's right there in the title. It's Hey, Listen to This, in which me and my co-host Ryan look at each other and say, hey, listen to this. And what this is usually an album, a music album that we diagnose and describe track by track, what we like about it, what we don't like about it, everything in between. And this month we are doing one of, as Ryan calls, a DEI initiative. And we are discussing albums in the realm of Pride Month. And Ryan, last week it was your choice. What did we talk about last week?
Last week, we ended up covering one of my favorite bands of all time, and that would be Against Me. And we covered their 2014 release, Transgender Dysphoria Blues. Very fitting for the theme of Pride, because, like we talked about in that review, that album was basically about the themes and, personal life experiences that Laura Jane Grace had during her transition after she came out as transgender. Well, I would even say, even before that with a couple other of the other songs. But yeah, walking away from the review, I was very happy to have the ability to talk about, one of my favorite bands with you, and one of my favorite albums from them. So yeah, it was one hell of a way to kick off Pride Month for us.
It was. Now, the flip side of that, going from a very deeply confessional hard rock punk album to what we're going to be talking about this week. And what we're going to be talking about this week is very much the opposite of last week. This week we are covering an album 30 years prior to the album we talked about last week from 1984, and that is the album Make It Big by Wham. Now, what is a Wham? Well, that's actually a good question because I know not everybody celebrates Christmas, but Wham is the British pop duo of one George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley. And during the 80s, they didn't last very long. They lasted from 1981 to 1986. And during that time, they only released 2 full-length LPs, this being the second of those. But they managed to get quite a few singles onto the charts in both the UK and the US, including 3 number ones off this album that we're going to be talking about. And realistically, their sound was becoming new wave just as new wave was peeking into the mainstream. Like, obviously, new wave, you start with like the late 70s and the post-punk scene with bands like Blondie, The Cars. I'm trying to think of a couple others you want to throw in there. But yeah, bands that were sort of experimenting with rock sounds, but still maintaining a relatively recognizable formula with tweaks. And those tweaks continued on through the early 80s until 1984, where it seemed like the whole thing just kind of blew wide open. You get MTV involved, you get more synths involved, the old guard of rock and disco and the countrypolitan movement pretty much closed themselves out in 1983, which is another discussion for another day. But by 1984, the sound was pop, and these guys very much knew the assignment. Make popular records. And so they did. Basically, it was a situation where George Michael was the lead vocalist, and Andrew Ridgeley was the keyboard player, the guitarist, and, for lack of better word, the other guy. Because most people think of Wham as George Michael's project, and there's really not a whole lot of discussion that would say otherwise. Now, in the case of this being a record for Pride Month, George Michael is bisexual. It took a while for the world to truly realize that and for him to admit it. It didn't happen until the late 90s. But there were whisperings about it. There were possibilities that could be discussed. But it being the 1980s, it wasn't necessarily as accepted as it is today. So Michael, despite being himself for the most part, had to be relatively hush-hush about it. Now, does that really come across on this record? We'll get into it. But, again, the main goal of these guys was to make popular music. And as far as my association with Wham, it's really this record. I have not listened to the prior one. I have not listened to Wham rap, which is a thing that exists. And yeah, that's pretty much what it boils down to. I remember buying this record or finding this record for like $1 somewhere. I think it might have been down in Florida. I was like, oh, I know a couple of these songs. And then picking up and like, oh, all right. Okay. And that's the story.
And one hell of a story it is, man. So when it comes to my experience with Wham, I mean, I like to tell you like how ignorant I am of what is a Wham. I only knew Wham from the Last Christmas song, and I also didn't know that Wham did include George Michael until I started listening to this record, and I talked to my wife Jamie about the fact that we were doing this review here today. She's just like, oh hey, yeah, George Michael. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I started to look into this record. I'm like, oh, I know the song "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go," and I know "Careless Whisper." So yeah, dude, that's pretty much my experience with Wham as a whole. So, and I know a lot of people poop on Last Christmas by the group, but I don't mind it. It's fine. So, but other tracks, well, I mean, we'll talk about it in the review here, but even just George Michael as a whole, I always respected him as a solo artist, but I've never took the time to dive into his solo material in terms of albums specifically. I know his song Faith. Because it was infamously covered by Limp Bizkit. Shout out to Limp Bizkit. But yeah, that's pretty much my experience with Wham and George Michael as a whole. So yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, I feel like that's kind of what it's meant to be, because there are artists out there who, like Laura Jane Grace and Against Me, as we talked about last week, use their music as a vessel to paint their whole beings out into canvas. They want to tell their story through music. Wham is not that group, and George Michael is not that type of singer. There is a pop craft going on here, and it's, pop stars have existed to make, decent bucks off of decent sized hits over the course of, rock and roll history, and these guys are no exception. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're not here to discuss how much money they made. We're here to discuss the songs themselves. So I'm ready to get into it if you are.
Yeah. And so the opening track is, one of the big songs off the record, one of the big singles. Probably, I would maybe argue, the second biggest single off the whole record. I mean, you might have, official chart performance, but, if I had to go off a gut instinct, gun to my head, Russian Mafia boss is asking me, yo, what single is more impactful, Careless Whisper or Wake Me Up Before You Go Go? I'm going with the latter. I'm going with the former of the two. But, anyways, Matt, you want to kick off the record with the discussion about Wake Me Up Before You Go Go?
Yes, I will kick things off with Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. And I did look it up. There were 3 number 1 hits in the U.S. from this album, and no shocker, this was one of them. And for pretty solid reason, too. Just the way you have that opening of Jitterbug, with the finger snaps, and it goes right into the swing beat that, very sunny, very upbeat, very swinging, top 40 stuff, but really nothing that was in at the time, if that makes any sense. Britpop might have had this, but America really hadn't gotten into this yet. We were still in the afterglow of things like Thriller and Purple Rain around this time that this song came out. So this was definitely a different sound for top 40 radio. And George Michael particularly makes himself very known to the massive American audience with this song, because his vocal performance is great. Going from the somewhat hushed tone on the verses to his belting of the chorus of Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, and the inflections throughout the post-chorus where he's talking about gotta get that high, that's just a professional move in and out. And this song is so definitively 80s, and I'm not just saying that because of the music video, which is in and of itself iconic with George wearing the Choose Life t-shirts, but it just sounds so 80s with the synths, with the synth horns, and a bit of a hot take to start this review. It's because of that very obese 80s sound that it did not land in my top 3. It did not land in my top 3. Now, this isn't to say I hate this song. I like this song quite a bit. I think this song is quite good, and it is a good start to the record, a good introduction to the band as a whole. But there's 2 main reasons I don't have this in my top 3. And for the record, I have a top 3 and a bottom nada. Is that, 1, obviously, I just like the other 3 songs better. And 2, the fake horns, and particularly when it gets the instrumental break where it's do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It doesn't sound bad, but it's kind of giving JCPenney commercial. It just sounds a little too synthetic for me to be like, oh yeah, this is the real stuff, man. Again, it's Popcraft, and I can't not, harp on them too much for going this route. But there are other moments on this album which I preferred in that regard, to the point where this just got knocked out of my top 3. It's a solid 4, maybe 5, depending on the day.
So, yeah, you're coming out of the gate, with a very, very spicy take. Maybe not a spicy take, but, it is our podcast. We have our opinions, and at the end of the day, those are our opinions. But, so when it comes to Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, for me, it did land in my top 3 at number 2.
Oh.
So,
okay.
Yeah, the very much 80s-ness of it, the very much Popcraft, very, almost kind of over the top-ish kind of elements really did it for me. Now, I'd be curious to explore reality where, my memory got wiped of this song, and you swipe it out with, I don't know, Credit Card Baby, for example, a track much later in the album. If that would have been a much like a better performing single, like in terms of like, you know, just a national consciousness knowing it. Like, would I prefer that song to Wake Me Up Before You Go Go? I mean, it depends. I mean, but this is a reality that we live in. So yeah, my overall thoughts about Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. I mean, I really can't touch on too much more than you already laid down because you did an excellent job introducing the track. I'll just say, like, a couple of the elements that really did it for me was just the use of horns to build up the feeling. And, like, you know, it's very much a 80s thing, but, like, the synths, they were doing a great job laying down the texture throughout the whole song. Like, they did add to the feeling. I did love that as well. Even though on the lyrical front, it's like the whole song is littered with, like, you know, like generic cute love lines. For me, like, maybe this is my dark humor, my jaded, like, you know, persona coming out. I feel like this song is basically about a guy who wants a one night stand to become a full time relationship. I mean, think about it. Wake me up before you go.
I see what you're cooking there. I see what you're going with.
Yeah, but, like, I don't know, like, the whole, it's just a happy-go-lucky song. It's very much like the it's very much in the same vein of, like, 24 Karat Magic in terms of just, like, this is just happiness in a song. And, like, while, like, you know, I could maybe critique a thing here or there, like, there really isn't anything, like, you know, substantial for me to, like, really, you know, go on about in terms of, like, oh, I don't like this about this song. But yeah, so one thing I want to throw out there for the listener is the idea of the chorus of the song came from a note left by bandmate Andrew Ridgely. If I'm mispronouncing that name, I apologize. You literally said it earlier, so
you got it.
Yeah,
you got it.
Oh, hey, look, I gotta believe in myself, man. So yeah, the note read, "Don't forget to wake me up before you go, George." And apparently, it wasn't a cute way of saying "before you go." It was just a typo. So one of the biggest pop songs of the '80s was like, at least on the title front, a result of a typo. I love that, man.
I guess the next generation's gonna have to try to match that by releasing a song called "Error 404." But yeah, like. Now, this song does, again, I agree with you. It basically is a very just happy pop song, and it does really just deserve its place in pop music history. And it's weird because this exact sentiment is going to be something I'm going to be using later to describe another song that did land in my top 3, but we'll get to that.
But in the meantime, we're going to boogie on over to Everything She Wants, the next song. And, so we shift gears on the pop sense with this song here, and, like, while they could have easily just ran it back with the feeling that you would have gotten with, like, you know, Wake Me Up Before You Go, like, here you kind of get like a funky kind of synthy kind of thing, kind of like an island kind of vibe. Like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's like a yacht rock kind of song. Like, there's other songs later on in the LP that we're going to be discussing that I'm going to very much be like, this is yacht rock to a T. But here, like, I can imagine, like, you know, this song being, like, on a lounge cruise and everything like that. But yeah, I like the overall feel of it. It's the synth work, again, is really cool. I really like the lick that is played right after the chorus. It, like, guides the listener back into the verse. I felt like that was a nice touch there. And the chorus itself, speaking of that, I kind of like the back and forth element that you see there, where, you know, in the chorus you get the lyrics, somebody tell me, oh, and then you get the echo, why won't you tell me? I look at the back and forth, like, I thought that was a nice element. Like, they could, again, it's nice to see the contrast between Wake Me Up Before You Go and this song here, because this is, again, riding on vibes and feels, but it's a different set of vibes and feels. Like, it's very echoey, vibey, funky, kind of groovy kind of song. I like it a lot. But I will say though, the song does overstay its welcome just a little bit. In terms of like around the 3 minute mark, I got a little surprised that there was still like, probably like a minute or 2 minutes left in the track. I was just like, oh, I guess this is a choice here. And like with that being noted, the outro doesn't add all that much to the track. Like I know often in our show here, man, like I like the idea of letting a band breathe and like do stuff with like the empty space, but they really don't do much. They just kind of were like, hey, yep, we're still vibing, still vibing, still vibing. And like this track didn't land in a bottom track kind of territory. And also for full disclosure, because I didn't mention it fully in the opening track discussion, I have a top three and a bottom two with this album here. And like, yeah, everything she wants. I obviously it takes the momentum down in terms of like momentum for me in this LP, but I like it. I like it nonetheless.
So, something I did not mention in the intro is that this is not the first time I've actually reviewed this album. Way back in the day, about 11 years ago, I want to say, I started a Tumblr where I reviewed albums specifically that were in my vinyl collection, and this was one of the albums that I did. And my thoughts on this track at that time were somewhat similar to what yours are now, which is that, it's a solid song, has a nice beat to it, and, with every passing, note, it tends to do its job and, doesn't say a whole lot and roll credits. Nowadays, though, it is my favorite song on the album. And the reasons for that are thusly. First of all, that beat is just relentless. And not only is the beat relentless, but particularly on the pre-chorus, where Michael was doing the da-da-da, 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 da-da. Like, it just plays into the rhythm so well. And it just creates for a great groove. His singing on the chorus, where he goes, "Somebody tell me," is just perfect. And not just him singing it, but the way it's produced. Like, it feels like he, like, went away from the mic to record that, and it feels like he just sort of, blasting it away and sort of, standing in the spotlight, begging someone to hear him. I love that. And I know I talked earlier about how this is a pop group that really doesn't dive into lyrical depth, but this song is pretty much a song that it's an anti-gold digger song, basically saying, everything she wants is everything she needs, and this girl that I'm seeing is, trying to buy me out of house and home, and now, she's having my baby, and if anything else gets added to the list, I'm gonna be done, to the point where it messes with his mind. And the lyrics aren't necessarily like, super deep like we talked about last week, but it is a very nice dark contrast to the sunniness of Wake Me Up Before You Go, in my opinion. And furthermore, the fact that Michael isn't a very macho singer, like, this was one of the things a lot of people got on him about during the 80s, and why a lot of rumors about his homosexuality or bisexuality were very in demand, is because he wasn't a very manly singer. Like, this is also the time where you have, Bruce Springsteen, for example, dominating on the charts with Born in the USA. If Bruce Springsteen had sung this song, he would have come off as a massive chauvinist, because that's the kind of singer that Bruce is. He's a very macho, husky, in-your-face type of singer. George Michael is not. And that makes this track work even better, because the fact that he's very not macho in his voice, like to the point of almost being feminine, it actually adds a bit of truth to him being like, like, it's not him going, "Hey, baby, you spend way too much on me." It's like, "Listen, you're spending so much, I can't do this anymore." And to me, that is a colossal difference in making this song work as well as it does. But, that's on the, more detailed side of things and probably why it's number one. But ultimately, it's just a really good beat and a really good vocal performance. And as far as like songs I'm taking away from this album, like this is right up there.
I'm trying to imagine a reality where Bruce Springsteen does do this song as like his own original song, and I don't want to live in that reality, man. One, like, I'm not the biggest fan of Bruce's vocals,
No, you're
and
not.
two, like, I'm right there with you in terms of George Michael's vocal delivery, like how he sounds in that chorus is really good, really authentic, and considering the context of the lyrics that you laid down, like it does encapsulate and embody that feeling of hopelessness and like anxiety that like the song is trying to drive home with, like the feeling of like, oh hey, we're falling in love, and then like things start to get out of things start to get a little bit more complicated, and like pretty soon you're just going crazy. So yeah, excellent points there, and yeah, I'm again, I respect the fact that this is your top track. Maybe if over time, as I get more used to it, like, I could easily go out of the tracks that, like, in my head that drag on just for a little bit too long. But, yeah, I think I've said all I have to say about Everything She Wants. Are you ready to move on to Heartbeats?
Yeah, just one final thing on Everything She Wants, and I'll kick it on over to Heartbeat, is that there are 3 versions of this song that are kind of in the general mindset of pop culture. There's the version from the album, then there's the single, and then there's the remix version. And ironically enough, I think the single is longer than the album version. I'm not sure why, but it's a very weird thing. And honestly, the single version might be better. So, like if you... The easiest way I can say this, like if you look this up on YouTube and just like the first thing of Everything She Wants, which is just a photo of them two, like that's the version like that really like sunk me into this song. Not that I don't love this version too, but that version I think is just a tiny bit better. But that's just a small little clerical thing as far as this song. Moving on over to Heartbeat, this song brings back the Joy vibes of Wake Me Up Before You Go, but in a much different context, because unlike the swing of that song, this is a straight 4/4, pretty much a take on pre-Beatles 60 girl group pop, like very much the Phil Spector vein of groups like the Ronettes, the Crystals, etc. And realistically, the lyrics on this track are pretty good. Occasionally you do get forced on the chorus when they're just trying to fill in spaces with words. And that's kind of what this song feels like. This song just feels like, hey, let's do something that sounds like a 60s girl group. Let's do the Ronettes, or let's do the Crystals, or the Angels, or whoever you want to plug in that, the Supremes. The piano and drums on this track, in the vein of Spector, are very nice, very professional. George Michael continues to be very good at singing, and honestly, this is about as album track it gets. Not in a bad way. Like, you listen to this on the album, you're like, oh, this is nice. You can shake your head to it. But it does go in one ear and out the other. And again, it's a very lovey-dovey track on the same way as Wake Me Up Before You Go. It doesn't have quite the same bounce to it, but I will say the joy in it does kind of put it on the same level for me, like maybe just a step back. Like if Wake Me Up Before You Go was my number 4, this is probably my number 5. Like this song's pretty good.
I can see that, man, and I feel like while like overall I feel like I'm a hair higher on this track than you are. This wasn't my third favorite track or even my first favorite track, but dear listener, it might be pretty easy to guess what my first favorite track is gonna be. Epic foreshadowing. But yeah, anyways, like Heartbeats, I would say I would put it in the bucket of Could have easily been my third favorite track, but I think I just went off a overall feel when determining that specifically. But yeah, just the reason why I like it a little bit more than you is the way that the chorus is laid out. For me, it's so infectious in terms of like just the overall feel and like the way that they say the phrase heartbeats. It's like heartbeat, heartbeat. Like, I like that rhythm that they utilize there. Like, it's very nice, and the overall sound of it is very pleasant. Like you alluded to how George Michael could sing very well. Shocker. And like even outside of the chorus, like just the overall flow of the instruments in the verses, like I thought that was very tight. Like everything is used to a purpose, and it just creates this like I almost want to say like on the lyrical front, like I kind of walked away from the song as like this was a summertime romance that fizzled out, and like oh no, we're back into reality, and like the other partner in this romance doesn't want to continue the romance anymore, but the narrator of the song does. I mean, it's pretty evident with the second verse where he's like, I need a lover when love's such a dangerous place to be. Oh, if we're meant for each other, then why won't you answer me? So like, it's a traditional like, oh hey, summertime was love and now it's just back to reality. It's just like, oh crap, and then like love comes crashing down. But like, especially like in the start of it where it's just like summertime of love kind of feel, like the verses, instruments, like they do an excellent job. It almost seems like a wedding day kind of like, jam, to be honest with you. And even going back into the discussion about my feelings about the chorus, I love like the what I labeled as stingers at the end of phrases in the chorus. But what I mean by stingers, like you get the rhythm, dun 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 dun. Like I thought that was like a nice element there. I'm right there with you. The piano work throughout the whole song is fantastic, and I was really taken away by it during the bridge. I thought that was a very solid section. But yeah, just overall, like, this is going into the great song bucket. And excellent deep cut for me. Yeah, very happy about it.
Yeah, I am too. This is definitely, it feels like with every single track on this album, and no surprise because they were pop stars and they did pop star things, that they probably went into the studio and said, hey, why don't we just try to make every song sound like it's going to be the single, and then we'll just pick our favorites from there? Because that's what this sounds like. This sounds like it was designed to be a hit single in the same way that all the others are. Like, you just tweak a couple of things here and there, and you possibly get another hit on your hands. Was it the case with this song? Not particularly, but you could definitely see in another universe where this is like, hey, this is really, really good. Let's put it on the radio. Let's put it out on a 45. Remember 45s, kids? But yeah, no, I think we've siphoned off as much knowledge as there is to know about Heartbeat, and we will close out side A with Like a Baby.
In terms of the songs that could easily be a single, I mean, just kidding. Yeah. I'm going to start with the positives. The lyrics here basically tell the story of a heartbreak, where like you get lyrics like that I really did like. Foreign skies, they blinded me to empty charms. I crossed the ocean, fell into your arms, so sure, so wrong. So basically, like alluding to the fact that like, oh hey, fell for the wrong person, and oh it was a huge mistake. I made this journey, and like I like that, and I like the overall sentiment of the lyrics, where this is heartbreak in a song, and like the whole like concept of like a baby, like crying like a baby. So like I like that, but outside of that, and just how it's a light touch kind of song, it does flow a little nicely. This song doesn't have much else going for it, man. Like, it is basically lounge music for the first minute and 40 seconds. And yes, I did time it. And for those of you who have seen the movie The Room. First of all, if you haven't seen the movie The Room, please, do yourself a justice and, go check it out. And then we can,
I'm curious as to where you're going to go with this, and I think I do, but please continue.
So, there's a scene there where the main character is experiencing lovemaking, and it's very cheesy music in the background. This is basically that in my head. Like, this is very cheesy, like, pure Muzak kind of vibes, and, yes, maybe you can have, there's, some sexy vibes to it, but, it bores me to tears at some extent. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say other than that. Like, nothing's really grabbing my attention, and when it comes to this track, I'm like, oh, yeah, I can't wait for this to be over. So, yeah, do I have to say it, specifically?
No, I think we can chalk this up as to it being your least favorite song on this whole album. Now, technically speaking, it probably is mine too, but it's not so bad that I had to give it that moniker, because I do like that intro for as long as it is, and it's quite long. And I will say that it does depend on your listening vessel. To me, I have this record on vinyl, and hearing it on vinyl for the first time in a long time, I was like, okay, I can vibe with this. And it does very much slide in and out the ears. But to me, it didn't come across as so bad. I was like, I don't want to listen to this, ever again. It's fine. It's very much fine. Like you say, the lyrics do a good job of describing heartbreak. It does have a very, sexy time, easy listening Muzak vibe throughout the whole track. My only real, thing I didn't like about it, and again, it wasn't enough to sink it to "this is bottom track," was just the fact that it ended and really didn't have any sort of ending. It just sort of, vibed along, and then it stopped. It didn't end. It stopped. Which I thought kind of especially considering how big they made their other songs, was kind of, disappointing. But I will say this about the song, which I did like, is that we've heard on pretty much every track so far, George Michael try to hit those high notes and sort of really push himself out there as, "Hello, I am George Michael. I am the singer in this group." He doesn't do that here, and I kind of like that. He very much sings along with the music. He doesn't push himself up above the music and basically shove down the entire track to where it's just basically him a cappella with a little bit of synth. I kind of like that, but ultimately, yeah, this track is more or less an album track too. To me, it was fine enough to decry it of any sort of real downplay, but yeah, it's a song.
Very much so, and this is gonna be one of the tracks that I'm gonna throw into the yacht rock kind of category, where this is basically kind of vibes. I love Steely Dan. Shout out to Steely Dan. We did a review of their album Asia. So yeah. So if you want to check out that review, whatever platform you're listening to us on right now, just scroll somewhere to go find it. Scroll back or scroll up, depending on how it's laid out. But yeah. I feel like I'm ready to move on from Like a Baby. If you're ready to go into Freedom?
I am ready to go into Freedom, but before that, we have reached the halfway point of the album, so you were talking about the platform of your choice, and if those listening want to find other episodes on platforms of their choice, what platforms could they use aside from the one they're currently using, which is a weird question to ask, but how can they listen to us, and how can they continue to support what we do here on Hey Listen to This?
When it comes to specifically the platforms that we are on in terms of podcasting and listening purposes, just any platform that you can think of, we are basically going to be on it. Anything from iHeartRadio to Spotify to Pocket Cast to Apple Podcasts. Like we are on it all, and if somehow if you're that dedicated that we aren't on your podcasting platform of choice, but you went to I don't know, our YouTube page specifically to listen to episodes, but you want us to be on your podcasting platform of choice, just shoot us a message, shoot us an email at ttkListen@gmail.com. Also, if you're currently listening to this episode and you wanna shout out a suggestion out there into the ether, you can shoot us a message at that email, or if you know us personally, shoot us a message over the interwebs or IRL. In terms of ways that you can help support what me and Matt do on a week in, week out basis, is one, just make sure you stay up to date with all the episodes, and two, just listen to any episodes that that catch your attention, or if you want to expand your musical taste alongside us, because we've run the gamut in terms of we've gone from the Torture Poets Department by Taylor Swift to Fishnets and Cigarettes by Toledo. That's a pretty wide spectrum there, if I could be honest with you. And outside of just staying up to date with the episodes and listening to them individually, in order to appease the algorithmic gods, make sure that you do whatever action that you got to do to make sure that you constantly stay up to date with our episodes, which is whether it's a subscribe or a follow on your specific platform of choice that you want to listen to us on. Also, make sure you leave us a positive review. That goes a long way. Word of mouth works too. And also, if you want to stay up to date with our episodes on social medias, we have Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. The tagline for that is TT Hey Listen. But yeah, that's basically going to be the gamut of ways that you can stay up to date with what we do, ways to support us, and if you want to communicate with us directly. But yeah, from the bottom of my heart, and to Matt as well, thank you for being a part of this journey with us. It's been one hell of a journey. I look forward to, bringing these episodes to you week in, week out. It's been a blast, man.
It has very much been a blast, and again, we love to continue to do this, and we appreciate any and all listenership. Again, word of mouth goes a long way in making things like this grow and achieve a solid core at its base. So I am ready to move on to freedom if you are.
Yeah, man, I am ready to talk about some freedom. America, baby.
Funny, because these guys are from Britain. But yeah, Freedom kicks off side B of the record, and once again we have a very retro-sounding track on the same lines as Heartbeat, particularly, and it does come off a little try-hard at the start with the doot, but it's the 80s, that's just the sound of the times. I can get behind that. It does give off a little JCPenney vibes again, but once again, 80s. The chorus I do like for the most part, where Michael is singing, "I don't want your freedom." It does kind of have a haphazard nature to it, not a very typical chorus, where it goes 4 lines and the last 2 lines are spread out to the point of "I don't want your freedom," and then it ends with "Baby, all I want is you." Which is an interesting twist, and I don't mind it, but at the same time, it wasn't super standoutish to me. I do like the fact that the horns aren't as synthetic this time around. They do sound a lot more natural than they did on Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, which I consider an improvement. And the bridge was pretty interesting with the fluttering doo-doo-doos in the middle there. This was another song that I think landed in the top 5, but wasn't a number 1 song. The first 2 songs that we covered on this album were number 1 hits for the record, both Everything She Wants and Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. This one I think was top 3 or top 5, but that's aside the point. The point is, this track's alright. I do like it quite a bit, but not enough to have it in my top 3.
Once again, I feel like I'm a lot higher on this track than you. It's not the big kahuna, okay? But yeah, this track did land in my top 3 at number 3.
Wow.
So yeah, like, and the reasons why this track beat out the likes of Heartbeats and even like the next track here, If You Were There, is the fact like just the overall song structure. Like, you did say that the beginning of the track was a little bit of a try hard JCPenney's-ish kind of feel with like the big horns and hits. I fell for the try hardness. I was just like, you know what? I support this. And just the overall flow of the chorus and the feeling, I can kind of get what you were saying with like it's broken up into multiple sections, but I love how that works out and like how it just progresses, and it's essentially like the way that it ends off is like you get the what, for a lack of a better term, like a stop on the instrumental front, and that vocal like that ends off the chorus. Like that's a fantastic moment. I love that so much. Initially on like first listen though, if I could be honest with you, I felt like in the first chorus the high note whenever Michael was singing Freedom was a bit pitchy, but upon multiple listens I discovered nah, it's fine. And yeah, pretty much. But yeah, just the overall like feel of it, man. Like it's very direct, it's very happy, it's very big, and I just love the performances and the song structure as a whole. And I like the bridge section that you mentioned. I did like that as well, especially with like the random, vocalizations. Like I thought that was pretty cool. And like the in terms of on the lyrical front, the way that I walked away from this song here was I felt like this song was centered around the need of a romantic connection in this guy's life, and you get lyrics like that exemplify this being like a prisoner who has his own key, but I can't escape until you love me. Side note, this is a PSA for anybody. You don't need a romantic partner to find fulfillment in your life. The ultimate peace that you're going to get within your own life is if...
This episode of Hey Listen to This was recorded in front of a live studio audience.
But yeah, like long story short, like when it comes to like just the need that some people feel like they have to have a romantic partner to fulfill their lives, that's not always the case. Like the most important thing is like you can have peace in between your ears at the end of the night. But yeah, I was a huge fan of Freedom, and like it's thanks to our show like this that I can discover deep tracks off of a record, off of a band that I never actually really took the time to listen to. So yeah, I like my fellow Americans, I very much am a fan of Freedom.
So just to double check, it hit number 1 in the UK and number 3 in the US. So it did crack the top 3. But did not reach number 1. But yeah, no, I'm right. I get where you're coming from. It just felt a little too synthetic to me, but that doesn't make it a bad track by any means. Like I definitely put it in the good/great song bucket on this album. Like it's definitely worth listening to because it does have that retro vibe that they have basically cornered the market on with this album, particularly on every other song. The odds have very much fallen in that same category of jaunty, upbeat 80s new wave pop. So yeah, I think they're accomplishing what they want to. But are you ready to move on to If You Were There?
Yeah, very much ready to move on to If You Were There. So remember earlier when I was saying like yacht rock was a thing? Yeah, this is pretty much like the most yachty rockish that you can yacht rock in this whole album here. But yeah, I'm very much a fan of it as well. Like I'm gonna put it into the bucket of songs like Heartbeats, in terms of like tracks that could have maybe cracked into that top 3 but quite didn't. And like the reason why Freedom got there was like a hair here or there. But yeah, in terms of If You Were There, Like, I just love the smooth vibes of the instrumentals. Like, it does do a really good job there. And like the overall, like, message of it is something I kind of like, you know, really appreciated. And at first, I thought that the message behind it was gonna be like, something like, backhanded, like, Brooks and Dunn, I'm no good, where it's just like blaming the woman for his cheating ways. But for this, it's kind of. I mean, I could be wrong, but the way I walked away from the track, I kind of got that this significant other, this partner in this relationship, had anxieties about like what this narrator does when that partner isn't around, and he's just trying to comfort her or them, if I can be honest, and saying like, "Hey, everything's gonna be okay. Like I'm not gonna do anything. Like you can trust me. Because it's by your side, girl, that I long to be." And I thought that was a sweet message. Just trying to reassure the other person in this relationship that nothing's gonna go wrong. But yeah, just outside of that and the vibes, I think what maybe kind of, held this track back from being like a top three song is the chorus really doesn't pop off. I mean, it doesn't really need to, but it's just, very much riding the vibes to a T. And yeah, like outside of that, I'm a fan of the guitar work and like the backing vocals in the chorus. Yeah, it's a good song. I like it.
I like it quite a bit too. We'll get to the reasons why in a second. But first of all, did you know that this is the only cover on the album?
No, I didn't know, man.
No, this is in fact a cover of a album track from the Isley Brothers of all people, from I want to say 1977 or it's sometime in the late 70s. The Isley Brothers recorded this for one of their albums. And George Michael heard this, is like, hey, let's do our own take on it. And I do not see, I mean, maybe the opening is a little yacht rock-ish, but the rest of it is very much new wave pop to me as far as I'm concerned. Like it just, the drums hit hard, the hand claps, it's pure pop in my ears. It's very much a very post R&B type of thing, or maybe not post R&B, but yeah, we'll just post disco. I think that's what I was going for, is post disco, not post R&B. That does not exist yet, and I don't necessarily know if I want to live in a world where it does. Back to this song. To me, this is just such a great sounding song. The band sounds phenomenal. George Michael, again, sounds great on this track. And kind of like it was the case with Like a Baby, he doesn't really elevate himself above this song. And I don't think he has to. I think the song just does so well on its own that, he could just sort of vibe along with it and just do his best to make it all work. I love the backup harmonies on the chorus, and on the outro too, the little ba-ba-bas. Dug those as well. The guitar sounds great. The drums sound great. The piano and the organ sound both very, very great. And it would be hard to really hear how this originated as an Isley Brothers track. I mean, I have heard the Isley Brothers version of this song, and it's quite good too, in the old sort of 70s R&B type way. But in my opinion, this elevates it to a level that is much higher than the original, and it just fits so well into the sound of 80s pop. Even though it wasn't released as a single, it did make the greatest hits collection, and for a very good reason. It just sounds that good. So we have once again landed in my top three. We have the number 2 song for me on this album.
Oh man, I can respect that, man. Yeah, I'm curious to see. Well, I mean, we only have like X amount of tracks left. Like how the rest of the album's gonna unfold for us here. But yeah, I can respect that. I do like If You Were There. It does ride some good vibes overall. And maybe I'm just mistaken. Maybe I need to experience life on a yacht to actually like claim to know what yacht rock is, and like just go on a yacht and listen to some Steely Dan in all white clothes, and like just drink like expensive liquor. Like I don't know. That'll be my retirement project many moons from now. But yeah. In terms of this moon right now, my friend, are you ready to go over to the penultimate track, which is Credit Card Baby, Credit Card?
Yes, Credit Card Baby. And for those keeping score at home, we have 2 tracks remaining. Ryan has yet to reveal his top track and his second least favorite track. I have yet to reveal my third favorite track. And anyone who knows even the slightest thing about this album and anything about Wham can probably guess which one is which. But we will professionally move on and discuss each one of them. For me, Credit Card Baby was very fascinating to me because it felt like the band was doing a mashup on its own album of songs that were already on the album. Because you get a very, like you said earlier, this is very much in the same exact beat as Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, but the lyrics are pretty much the same as Everything She Wants. Like, it's just had that swinging jaunt, with the fake horns and the swinging beats and, George Michael doing the, skibby-doo bops where he can. But the lyrics are very sour as far as, here you go, I don't need your credit card, baby. And, or it's basically a song about the financial struggles of the 1980s and, trying to love with, a credit card account, I suppose. Like, to me, this is another album track. It basically, once you kind of get the beat and you get the vibe of the lyrics, you're just like, okay, I know what the song's doing. And you kind of just go on autopilot for the next 2 or 3 minutes. Save for on the chorus where it talks about red hot fingers. I saw that and I was like, I don't know about that one. I think that line could have been rewritten. But aside from that, I don't have a whole lot else to say about the song. It's fine. It's very 80s. It's very Wham. It's aight.
So, this is actually my favorite track off the album.
Do you... Oh, is that the case, Ryan? I did not know that. Do you also have some oceanfront property in Arizona you'd like to sell me?
I did take a drink there for the listeners out there who are not subscribed to our video feed on our exclusive dark web Patreon that we haven't launched yet. But anyways, so Credit Card Baby is not my favorite song off the whole album. It is my second least favorite, and I'll start with the reasons why, and it's for multiple things you already kind of alluded to. This sounds like you said, it sounds like a mashup of a lot of the songs already, and it just sounds like a rehash of that. And for me, like, we've already gone through Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, Heartbeats, Freedom, If You Were There. Okay, you're just being redundant for the sake of redundancy. So, if this song was sequenced earlier in the album, sure, cool. Like, it might have been, I wouldn't say a favorite track, but definitely not a second least favorite. But it does drag outside of even, the critique that I have about it being, a rehash of things that we already, experienced prior. It doesn't need the last minute and 30 seconds. And, yes, I did time it. And outside of that, though, the reason why it's not a least favorite track for me is I did like how it started out with the little fun intro, the horn part. I thought that was pretty cool. And the instruments on the verses are doing a great job establishing a flow that works well. But, yeah, very much of a vibe that we've already heard. On the lyrical front, though, you kind of, already touched on that with the talks about, finances and, how this guy's getting taken advantage of his money, and he kind of knows it. But, yeah, it's a confusing song on that front. But, yeah, it might be one of those songs that it's okay if you aren't paying attention and you're just vibing out to it. And like, you know, to your point at the beginning of the review here, you mentioned about the fact that Wham was looking to make singles. They were looking to make pop music, and they do that with here, Credit Card Baby. And maybe like this was one of the tracks that you kind of alluded to, that they were like, hey, we'll just, you know, create a whole bunch of pop songs and we'll pick our favorites and those will be the singles. So like maybe in the alternative reality where Wake Me Up Before You Go isn't one of the singles and Credit Card Baby was, maybe MasterCard could have made a good partnership with Wham, and oh my goodness, that would have been a match made in heaven. But in terms of Credit Card Baby, yeah, it's my second least favorite track off the LP.
Yeah, no, I kind of get where you're coming from with that. And as fate would have it, the war for George Michael's sponsorship ended up going to Diet Coke, for those who want to look into that part of history as far as the rock and roller cola wars, as Billy Joel once put it. But yeah, it's very much an album track. Goes in one ear, out the other. Didn't offend me to the point where I had to make note about it, but yeah, it doesn't really merit further thought. So switching over to a song that very much does merit further thought, we have reached the conclusion of Make It Big with the final track, the other big one, and that is Careless Whisper. Mr. Kearns, the floor is yours.
Oh man, if I would have planned this out better, I would have had my saxophone ready and just started to do the riff. But, you know, this is life. That's Walgreens. But anyways.
Speaking of sponsorship deals, apparently.
Yeah. The most iconic song off the record, and for good reason. Just the way that the overall track feels, like, at least especially coming out right out of the gate, like it's a very open, spacey kind of vibe, and it's very much defiant compared to like the pop aesthetic that other tracks off this LP were bringing to us with, like, you know, Wake Me Up Before You Go, like the other tracks that I've mentioned literally in our in the discussion with the prior track, Credit Card Baby, and like that is fantastic. I mean, do I have to say anything about that sax part? It is one of, if not the most iconic sax lick in history. I will not take any arguments. It's just fact. Put it in pen, put it in blood. But outside of that, the chorus, again, fantastic. Not much I can really say about that. It's just the way that it's the feeling of it, with you can feel the hopelessness and the heartbreak happening, but it's an emotion that it's not sad, it's just accepting of the reality that you're in at this moment. And for that, if that's the way that the feeling comes across there, and that's probably what sells the song as a whole. It's an acceptance of the reality that you live in now. And it's not sad. Well, it's sad, but it's not defeatist. It's just blue, if I could describe it accurately. But outside of that, vocals, really tight. And the bridge is really good. I really love the bridge. And an underrated part that I'm going to mention here, the bass part, like, it's doing, like, the Lord's work. It's doing, like, you know, George Michael's work. It's doing the work of, like, you know, the hobo that lives on the streets. Like, it's really good, man. I like it a lot. And, like, overall, like, you know, I'm not gonna really dive too much into the lyrics because, you know, this is a very popular song for a very good reason. But yeah, it's a heartbreak song. You get very much a lot of lyrics about, like, you know, dancing forever, but now who's gonna dance with this narrator? Please stay. Like, I absolutely love it. It's a great song. It's my favorite song off the whole record for a goddamn good reason.
Yeah, no, we have concluded my top 3 as well. I have it at number 3. And a lot of the things you said, I do agree with, although there is one thing that you did mention, which I will potentially argue despite your inquisition. First of all, I want to give a little bit of love to Andrew Ridgeley, the other guy in Wham, because I know we've been talking pretty much nonstop about George Michael in this review, and to be honest, for good reason. George Michael is George Michael. And he is the voice of Wham, and he is the voice of George Michael, which is, one of the most iconic sounds of the 80s. But the intro to this particular song, the album version of this song, where you get that nice little guitar in the background behind Michael singing those first few lines, that's Andrew Ridgeley, and he sounds really good on this track. Like, that guitar does a lot of good work in the intro, and it sucks in a sense that this track has been credited professionally as being a George Michael solo track, because the single does cut out that intro with that guitar where you really don't hear it the rest of the song, except sort of in the background. But yeah, that intro has been lost to time, and I think it deserves a little bit of recognition. But then you get the saxophone, performed by, I looked this up, Stephen Gregory is the name of the man, credited with this iconic saxophone in Careless Whisper. And personally, I would possibly throw in Tequila by the Champs or Baker Street by Gary Rafferty into that conversation with Careless Whisper, but even then, I think you're still probably put this one at the top as most iconic sax lines in pop music history. And like you said, George Michael sings great. I think the lyrics are pretty great too. Where he sings, I'm never going to dance again. And he's talking about how, like you say, he's very accepting of the situation he's put himself in, and just sort of being a little extra about it, which, how more 80s can you get than being extra about something that's, fully realized. So yeah, this track deserves its place in history, whether it's the sax, whether it's George Michael singing, or the whole overall production of the track, which, by the way, I would argue this is the most yacht rockiest track on the entire album by a country mile. Like, this is something I could sip alcohol on a boat to. Like, to me, especially with the sound of that sax. But that's just me, and that's just my opinion. But yeah, now this track is great. I have it at number 3. No more notes than that.
Man, I feel like you and I just need to have a weekend getaway where we just go on a yacht and we drink some alcohol and debate what actual yacht rock is, and maybe we can finally settle this debate once and for all. But until then, we can't do that right now. We can't say that we've done that for right now. But in regards to discussing "Make It Big" by Wham, there's one thing we can say about that.
Yes, there is. We did it.
We did it, man. We went up to Wham, and we were like, make it big. And we experienced what that making of it big was.
Yeah, no, we definitely did find out what it meant to make it big from Wham. I'll go ahead and go first as far as my overall thoughts on this album. We've talked a lot in recent weeks with the last at least 3 albums we've done, which were the Marshall Mathers LP, Toxicity, and Transgender Dysphoria Blues, not in that order. And in those albums, there was a lot of deep lyrics, a lot of very confrontational themes. None of that is in this record, and none of it has to be in this record. This is 100% a pure pop music record. So much so that I would consider this a litmus test for anyone who hasn't really heard pop music. Like, hey, if you haven't heard pop music, if you haven't heard 80s pop music, if you haven't heard the 80s sound, try this album out for size. Listen to this. Listen to this album and tell me what you think. In my opinion, I liked a lot of the tracks on it. I liked Everything She Wants for its pulsating rhythmic nature. I liked Careless Whisper for its iconic saxophone solo. If You Were There is just a gem of an album track to me. And even Wake Me Up Before You Go Go is so iconic that even for my criticisms of it, I still understand why it's considered one of the most popular songs and favorited songs of the entire 1980s. And the rest of the tracks range from solid to very good. I can't give this a 10, obviously, because it's not that kind of a record. But again, it's a very good litmus test for people getting into 80s pop specifically and pop overall in general. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10.
And for me, it's interesting that even just walking away from the review, obviously the bookends of the album were highlights for me for obvious reasons. I mean, they're very popular songs. They're probably the most iconic songs that the group has ever done. But even outside of that, the album itself has some very good deep cuts. I'm a fan of Freedom, like I mentioned. If You Were There, I'll agree that's a really good song. Heartbeats is another really good deep cut. And, while I did have critiques about, Like a Baby, where I'm just nothing's really happening here, and it just kind of drags down. And, also Credit Card Baby was a bit of a rehash of, the album's themes and, sonic templates that was used throughout the whole album up until that point. I can't deny the fact that Careless Whisper is one mammoth of a song. It's an iconic song for good reason. And even Wake Me Up Before You Go, it's a very good happy-go-lucky kind of song, a la 24 Karat Magic that I mentioned earlier in the review. Surprisingly, I'm going to be right there with you in terms of an overall album rating. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10 as well.
Well, that makes the math this time very easy. Your 8 out of 10 and my 8 out of 10 average out to an 8 out of 10. Because
Math works for everybody except for blind hobos.
Well, I'm sure they could probably learn to. I wouldn't rule them out. So for my next album recommendation, I hate to do this because this has been a cardinal rule of mine ever since the beginning of this podcast, but I'm going to break my own rule. I'm going to recommend an album who I only know the singles from. I have not listened to it the full way through. But because of the major singles on this album, I feel like it's a proper comparison, specifically due to the sound of the 80s, particularly the neo-soul sound of Make It Big. And I am going to recommend, even though I have not listened to it in full yet, in fact, I'll make that promise. I will listen to it in the near future. I will listen to this album in the near future, for no other reason than to feel spiritually safe. And that is the debut album from 1985 of one Whitney Houston. Because there's two songs on that album in particular that very much remind me of the songs on this. How Will I Know is very much her Wake Me Up Before You Go, and Saving All My Love For You is her Careless Whisper. And that is the criteria that I'm going off of. I have not listened to the rest of the album, but I feel like a lot of people listening to this album have probably heard the singles and not the rest of the album either. So that's the comparison point I'm making. Plus, I haven't listened to Like a Virgin yet either, so I can't really recommend that either. So Whitney Houston's debut album, that is my point. And I'll say, it's her self-titled release from 1985. I think she may have released an album before that, but again, Whitney Houston, 1985, my next album recommendation for you and also for myself.
And for me, in terms of next album recommendations, I kind of struggled with this one because, I originally was going to go that Steely Dan record that we reviewed much earlier on in our show, Asia. Go check out that album and that review after you guys get done with this one here. It was a good time. But then, upon further listening, at least to the opening track, I'm like, nah, this isn't quite the tempo that I want to set. And then, I was looking at, who George Michael has influenced over the years. I'm like, the name Sam Smith came along. And then I started listening to his debut album, In the Lonely Hour. And I listened to the whole thing, and I'm like, it's not something I can, stick my flag in quite yet. So, and then just, I don't know, by this, the Holy Spirit, influencing me with just random inspiration, I thought about a group that I haven't thought about in years, and yeah, I'm gonna go with this recommendation here. And this album was released in 2011, and the group is Foster the People, and it's their debut album, Torches. And yeah, the reason why I'm going with Torches is that a lot of big choruses, the vocalizations are kind of the same with the almost like airiness and soulful kind of vibe too, and the instrumentations. I feel like Foster the People steal a lot of their inspiration from 80s kind of very much from this crop of genre musical instrumentals, and they just expand it to a modern day audience. Songs like Helena Beat, great flows, pumped up kicks, the biggest single off of there, and that album has plenty enough good deep cuts. I actually might listen to that fully later on, maybe even tomorrow, because it's been a while since I've listened to that record in full. But yeah, needless to say, my official recommendation, if you've enjoyed Make It Big by Wham and you're looking to go to another place in terms of another musical journey, check out Torches by Foster the People.
Great recommendation. I have always been a fan of pumped up kicks and also Helena Beats, so I very much concur with your idea. So if you, listener, have enjoyed Make It Big by Wham and you're looking for somewhere else to go, we recommend that you either listen to Whitney Houston's 1985 self-titled release or Foster the People's 2011 release, Torches. So yeah, man, what a journey this album was. Very much a trip down 80s lane for the both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. We keep on rolling through, Pride Month in good fashion. Obviously, this was a bit of a step down in terms of just overall feelings from the previous review, but it was still a good time for both of us, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think anything was going to be able to top last week as far as content, especially something as deep and crazy as Against Me's album that we both rated very highly. Speaking of which, it is your turn to pick where we go next for Pride Month, Ryan. Where is that going to be?
All right. So they at the start of this whole Pride Month idea, when I was drafting out ideas for albums or artists that we're going to cover, I knew I wanted to cover Against Me, and I knew I wanted to cover that specific album, so that's why Captain Phillips 2 into that review. Glad that you gave it a positive rating. And then in terms of other artists and albums, there were two sets of artists with individual albums that I wanted to cover. So the way that I'm going to have you pick between these artists and that specific album is, for better for worse, this is the only way I could come up with it, the color of each person's hair that I'm about to lay out in front of you. These are celebrities, musicians, okay? You following?
I think so.
All right. So I'm going to have you pick between Carrie Underwood or Paul McCartney.
Carrie Underwood or Paul McCartney. Now the question is this the album that I'm thinking about? Or is this the artist that I'm thinking about? Because it probably isn't. But assuming that it is for selfish reasons, I am going to choose Carrie Underwood.
All right, fair enough, my good friend. So, for our next review, we are going to be traveling to the year of our Lord, 2016. Remember 2016, man? What a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are going to be covering the second studio album by the American singer Frank Ocean, and that album is called Blonde.
I was close. I was in the right ballpark. I was in the Odd Future ballpark, but it wasn't what I thought it was. I'll leave it at that.
I'm really excited to talk about Blonde by Frank Ocean next week, dude. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've never listened to Blonde by Frank Ocean, or if it's been a minute since you've thought about Frank Ocean, or you've listened to Blonde by Frank Ocean, do yourself a favor and check out that album before next week's review. That way you can have opinions about the album, and you can have opinions about the opinions that me and Matt are bringing to the table. But yeah, man. Can't wait for next week's review, man. It's going to be one hell of a good time.
It really is. It's been a while since I've bumped some Frank Ocean, so I'm very much looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. But in terms of Wham and this review, I'm just never gonna dance again.